Hey everybody, today we are reviewing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So this is the final Guardians of the Galaxy film, at least by James Gunn. Now, if you don't know James Gunn, he's written and directed every Guardians of the Galaxy movie so far. He had some controversy with some old tweets a few years ago, got kicked by Disney, went to DC and did their Suicide Squad movie, The Suicide Squad, featuring Idris Elba as a star, it wasn't Death Blow, I can't remember that guy's name, John Cena as Peacemaker, that whole thing. And then he came back after that to do Guardians 3 because he got rehired shortly thereafter. But in between the couple of months or weeks or whatever that time frame was, Warner Brothers snatched him up and signed him away. So since then, he's done Guardians 3. He's done the Peacemaker TV show, which I really enjoyed. And now he is master and creator of all things DC in terms of movies and film, along with the co-head Peter Safran. They took over DC Studios a couple of months ago. So this is his final Marvel effort. He's talking Guardians, and I think his next project right now, aside from like managing the DC mess that it is going to be, he's writing and directing a Superman film. Now, I don't know how soon that's going to come because there's a writer strike going on. Apparently, he turned in a draft of it before the strike happened. So maybe as a director he could work on it. I have no idea. But he is also the head of a studio, so I'm sure he's still working on it in some capacity, right? But we're a couple of years off from that film. But seeing Guardians of the Galaxy 3 makes me excited for that Superman film. The Guardians films so far have been some of the best Marvel movies have ever had to offer. They have a unique voice, a unique style, a unique tone, and you have to credit James Gunn for every single bit of that. All of the characters are fleshed out, they all have their own idiosyncrasies, they all have relationships with each other, and all of that is all defined in the film, in all of these films themselves. And even over the time, like you do need to watch the Guardians Christmas special before seeing this. There's one little piece of a line or two here and there in the movie that references that. There were some developments in that special between Mantis and Peter Quill that are mentioned here. So if you don't watch that, you won't really know it. But is it central to the film? No. The previews have not really shown how dark this movie is. This is a dark film. And I'm talking about like not picture quality or anything like that. It's colorful, and that's one of the things I love and appreciate about James Gunn's aesthetic is that it is colorful. You can see colors. It's not this like sepia toned or super blue toned or super gray toned thing. Everything is kind of pops a little bit. He likes to pop stuff up. But just in terms of not the visuals, but the tone of the movie is very dark. In the previews, you have the Guardians running around, jumping on things, fighting bad guys. And the bad guys you're seeing are humans, right? Or something like that. And you're going, all right, cool. Well, what they didn't show you in the previews is all of the weird high evolutionary creatures that are actually in the film. So, like, there's a shot with the Guardians spinning around, like it looks like a one-shot thing in the previews, and they're shooting bad guys and stuff like that. In the trailer, it's just a bunch of humans. You're like, okay, cool. That's a pretty empty hallway. In the film, there's a bunch of like CGI monsters or creatures, characters, whatever you want to call them, that are taken up and they're doing, all sorts of different things to them. It's a great scene in the movie, don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed this movie. However, there's so much stuff in here that I was not expecting and stuff that just made me like pull back on and revile. Let me just say this out of the way. This is not a film for small kids. And I know my buddy Ian Levenstein, my wife posted on Facebook after we saw the film, like, hey, don't take your kids to see this. There's stuff in here that's really gross, and the animal stuff is really sensitive for some kids, and even some adults. There's a lot of like animal. I'm not gonna call it animal processing or torture. Just experiments on animals, animals in cages, that sort of thing. Animals altered with machinery, and they just look weird. So it's funny for James Gunn, I guess, because you have a little bunny that just has arms flopping underneath because you put spider legs on it, but it is very, very disturbing. So we'll just say a lot of disturbing animal stuff in here. And with that, with these high evolutionary creatures, they're very weird looking. They're very well designed because they are so disturbing. I would say do not take your kids to this. Going back to the story, my buddy on the Comic Timing podcast, Ian Levenstein, was like, "Well, it is rated PG-13, and yes, I know, but look where my kids live. I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. Now, I'm not necessarily trying to take my 5-year-old to every Marvel movie or anything, but he has watched some during the daytime on Disney Plus. He's watched clips. I'm sure YouTube Kids is full of stupid shit like that, or they're opening up toys and things like that. So they're exposed, the kids today, which Ian might not understand if he doesn't have any, so no offense to anybody like that, but kids today are exposed to these marketing movies. Like, you remember when you were a child of watching TV and seeing the Saturday morning cartoons, and then you had commercials, you had tie-ins with Happy Meal toys and everything like that, like Batman Returns back in the day. Happy Meal tie-ins, glass cases, like Batman Returns was everywhere. And then you went and saw the film and you're like, holy shit, this is Penguin biting a guy's nose off with black blood and goo, gross. It was a clear disconnect. So there's that same element here. If you agree that Batman Returns is not a kid's movie, I would say then you would also agree that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, also not a kid's movie. So there's that animal stuff. There's very disturbing. That's there too. But also, it's not a kid's film because it's very heavy. It's about trying to save... Something happens to Rocket, and we're saving Rocket the whole time in this film. And it's very character-centric, and that's very heavy. It's not There's no magic MacGuffin or anything to go find and solve. Maybe there's a little bit with the code stuff, but it's all about relationships. It's all about love and family and the threat of losing somebody you love. And that's heavy stuff. So emotionally heavy, very dark. Tonally, very dark. The animal stuff, very dark. High evolutionaries, weird as hell. So yeah, I would say probably my recommendation, if you have a very experienced, adult 12-year-old, I guess maybe. But yeah, I think that 13 there is definitely there for a reason. And I'm not letting my daughter, who's 8, I'm not going to let her watch this for a couple of years at least, or at least go, hey, no, I really don't think you should, that sort of thing. Because they don't have free reign on Disney Plus. They have their own profiles and they kind of stick to that. But yeah, if we do a rewatch or something, this is something I'm going to go, let's skip this. In the same way that I might skip Multiverse of Madness because it's a little bit too horror for children. So yeah. The way you can take the kids to a Marvel movie, Avengers Civil War, or Captain America Civil War, you cannot do that here with Guardians 3. So that would be my thing. It's not just superheroes punching each other with a bad guy. There's some really disturbing stuff in here. And to that point, that is kind of what makes the movie good. You've had Marvel movie after Marvel movie for a long time that's kind of been the same. And every time James Gunn comes in here with a Guardians film, he injects something that you realize the rest of the Marvel Universe is missing. Feeling, color, music, humor, just all sorts of things that are distinctively his and distinctively Guardians that he carries on in this movie, and it just hits it out of the park every single time. Yeah, the playlist is a little bit different because it's not 70s and 80s. You're moving into the 90s, 2000s. Space Hog Drop, I really enjoyed. I love that song. In the Meantime, they're a little one-hit wonder band that I've kept track of, but everybody else would be like, I don't know when you say Space Hog, but when you hear that song, you're going to know it. So there's a lot of that stuff in the film that carries that through. It's still a Guardians movie, and it's just a whole lot of fun. And I think revolving the last Guardians movie around the characters instead of a MacGuffin or an individual villain really made it feel weighty, really made it feel heavy. The threat of Rocket losing his life and trying to go and find out how to save him made everything like just feel really grounded in a way that Marvel movies have not been in the last couple of years, because we're looking for Kang, or we're doing the Quantum Mania BS, or the Marvels is going to do a kooky comedy thing, which might work and it might not. I'll be interested to see that. But Guardians 3, weighting itself in the characters, in the team, in those personal stakes, made this movie super enjoyable and super meaningful, especially as a group of characters that nobody knew before the movie did, right? I mean, you had some comics fans that were reading that series, but that series, Guardians of the Galaxy, the most recent iteration of it, not recent, but the one before the first movie came out 10 years ago, only lasted, like 25 issues or something like that. The Annihilation storylines were mild hits, but I've still not read them. So to say that they're huge amongst comic book fans, this group of characters, the Guardians of the Galaxy, is a complete misnomer. And it still kind of is. The movies, built them up a little bit, and they've had successive series ever since that first movie came out, with different groups coming in, kind of centering around what the movie cast is. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes going forwards now that the movies are done, and maybe the Guardians books will be no longer there because they're not, it always has felt in the comics anyway as like it's the publisher pushing it because there's a movie out, not because there's a demand for those characters in the comics, if you know what I mean. Guardians, this group, for most of the public, is distinctively a movie team. So to try and get that feel in the comics is very hard and very difficult, and I don't feel like they succeed a lot of the times. So that's just me. Again, I haven't read any of the original Guardians run that this is based on. I think I've read all of the Bendis stuff that came out right after that first film, and that was so. And I don't think I've read anything past that. Just wasn't that interested in it. So to me, for the general public, I think it's a majority like movie franchise. So to have this ending here in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 might kill a lot of interest in some of these characters. So, speaking of killing, the High Evolutionary here is an interesting villain. I like the actor. He was from Peacemaker. I cannot remember his name off the top of my head, or much less pronounce it if I did read it. But he's a phenomenal actor. He was phenomenal in Peacemaker. He's great here as a High Evolutionary. What they don't do is explain where he came from. And I guess it's just because it's one of these Marvel things where it's like, hey, here's another character that's been around forever, and we don't really need to explain it. He's a cosmic force. I guess the same way they kind of explained Ego a little bit, but they don't really explain his origin or anything here, which is fine. It's just weird to be like, oh, here's the High Evolutionary, and he kind of drops down, and all of a sudden he's a major threat. The whole stuff with Counter-Earth here, that's not really explained. It feels like it lives somewhere else in the galaxy as opposed to, I guess in the comics, I'll tell you this, it revolves around the same sun that we do. So you're always like, you can never see it from Earth. Hence the name Counter-Earth, because on the opposite side of the sun in the orbit at all times. So, everything's kind of flip-flopped that way, but that it's a replica. So that's not the case here. It doesn't seem like it's in the same solar system or anything like that. It's just somewhere else, and they call it Counter-Earth. And it's like, I know what that means and what you're referencing, but there's no reason for the movie to call this Counter-Earth other than the High Evolutionary really enjoyed it. And I think the High Evolutionary in the comics is like was originally an Earthman. I could be wrong, but maybe he really, again, he's an underused villain in the comic books, or maybe there just haven't been like a great take. Like he's not Doctor Doom or anything like that. You know what I mean? He's not used constantly. And when he is, it's always a little weird because he's into this invention stuff, or this genetic modifier thing. So, where was I going with this? Oh, I think he's an Earthman because of the Counter-Earth thing. So it is a little weird for him to be like, the 70s were the best time on Earth, and that's what I'm going to model my Counter-Earth on. So it's a little weird, and I guess you just kind of take it as like, hey, this is James Gunn really enjoyed growing up in the 70s. So to him, everything was perfect back then, and that's what we're going to model Counter Earth on. It's not really like explored. It's just kind of like, haha, the 70s were fun. Let's go back there. Or the 80s were fun. Let's go back there. So that would be my main things. Like, it's not really explained like why it's called Counter Earth at all. You know, the only counter thing is that you have these creatures living there versus humans. I don't know. But I think the way, if they ever did a Mr. Sinister movie or had him as a villain in the X-Men films, you would now have to look at the High Evolutionary because they basically do the same thing, right? Mr. Sinister's growing genetic clones of things to try and get them better, and High Evolutionary is trying to do that with animals to do that. It's never explained why High Evolutionary only picks like Earth animals to experiment on, as opposed to other alien life forms. That was a little weird. I will say though, my favorite thing, and I think it was just laughing because I was sitting next to my wife, and when you went to the bio planet, the bio grown planet or whatever, and my wife is like, that place looks like a ball sack. It's just when they're landing on there with the space hog drop. Very fun, very kind of gross, and just kind of this more of this feeling of like, ooh, yeah, this is weird, funny but weird thing that is uniquely James Gunn. So, man, I really enjoyed this movie. All right, so let's switch up. I really enjoyed this film. I think you should be excited to watch it, and I think if you have watched it, I think you will have enjoyed it. So let me know down below in the comments what you thought of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and we'll find you guys next time in the Funny Pages.